Gym Candy Part 4, Chapter 7. For the rest of the week, I spent every afternoon playing volleyball and then walking around Green Lake afterward with Kaylee. Every time I looked at her, she seemed brighter and more alive. Sometimes talking to her was awkward, but other times we'd get going and the words came naturally. On Thursday and Friday, I drove Kaylee home. "It's cool that you have your license," she said. "I didn't get held back or anything," I said. "My dad just didn't start me when I was 5. "My parents did the same thing with my younger brother," she said. Saturday, the plan was to play volleyball, walk the lake, eat at the Green Lake Cafe, and then see a movie at the Majestic Bay. When I left the house after lunch, I told my mom I'd be home late. "Good," she said. "Glad to hear it." Parking was much harder than usual by Green Lake. As I neared the field, I could tell something was different. Instead of pickup volleyball games, a tournament was going on. Around the outside of the field were booths selling volleyballs, visors, knee pads, and ankle braces. All that stuff. It was a hot day, the hottest day of the summer. I spotted Kaylee and the others under a tree in a circle, bumping the volleyball. The girls were wearing shorts and bikini tops. Kaylee's was white, and it made her tan more golden. I joined the circle. "Can we play in the tournament?" I asked. "We can play," Drew answered, "but it costs $50 to enter." $50? I asked. $50, he repeated, "and when we lose twice, we're out." We bumped a little longer until finally Natalie Vick caught the ball. "We've got to decide." "I say no," said Deshawn. "We got no chance. It's a waste of money." "So what are we going to do instead?" Kaylee said. "How about we go swimming?" Drew suggested. "We could swim and then walk around the lake to dry off." Within minutes, the girls were in the water, with Drew right behind them. Deshawn had been wearing high-top basketball shoes, so it took him time to unlace them. "I'll stay up here and watch everybody's stuff," I said to him. "Nobody's going to take anything," he said. "I don't feel like swimming." Deshawn shook his head. "It's a zillion degrees. There are 3 girls out there in little bikinis waiting for you, and you don't feel like swimming? You're nuts." He turned, ran down the beach, and dived into the water. I saw Kaylee talking to him, and then she swam toward me. "Come in the water, Mick," she called out. "It's not cold, really." Then Heather and Natalie started calling for me to join them. I didn't know what to do. I'd been taking the Nolvadex for nearly a week. I thought my nipples had pretty much gone back to normal, but I still had some zits on my back and chest. The girls kept waving and calling. Other people on the beach were starting to stare. I felt like an idiot, so I took off my shoes and shirt and raced into the water until it was knee-high, then dived and swam out to them. I stayed hunched down, treading water, only my head visible. The girls were doing the same thing, hiding their bodies. We splashed each other for a while, and then Deshawn and Drew swam over to the pier that juts into the water, climbed up, and dived off. Soon, Heather and Natalie started diving too. "You want to dive?" Kaylee asked. "Not really," I said. About after 10 minutes, the rest of them climbed out and sat on the pier in the sun, talking and sunbathing. "You want to sit on the pier?" Kaylee asked. "You go ahead. I'll just go back to the beach and dry off." "I'll get out too," she said. "No, don't," I said. "Stay with them." "Only if you do." What could I do? I liked her. I didn't want her to think I was weird. Besides, I wasn't really sure if anybody would notice anything. It's not as if I were the only guy in high school in the world with a few zits on his chest and back. So I swam over to the pier, grabbed hold of the ladder, and pulled myself up. Kaylee had climbed up before me and was sitting down. As soon as I stepped onto the wood planks, she looked at me. She'd been smiling, and then her face dropped. I looked down at my body. In my bathroom with a nightlight on, my chest hadn't seemed too bad. But out in the bright sunlight, there was no pretending. My nipples were still oddly puffy, and my zits were red and angry. Kaylee had caught herself. The revulsion was gone from her face. In its place was a phony cheerfulness. The rest of them were the same. When they looked at me, they made sure that they looked only from the neck up. I forced myself to sit there for a minute, for 2 minutes, for 3. Then I stood. "I've got to go now," I said. "My dad needs me to help him paint." Before anyone could object, I walked the length of the pier back to the beach. I dried myself a little with my shirt and then pulled it on. How stupid could one person be? I looked back for a split second. Kaylee had stayed on the pier with the rest of them. which was where I wanted her to be. Once I got into my Jeep, I turned the radio on full blast and drove, taking every turn hard and fast. I drove east on 45th, away from Green Lake, from my home, from Shoshone High, from Popeyes, from everything. I was headed nowhere, just away. I wasn't sure if I wanted to think or if I wanted to keep myself from thinking. I followed 45th out to I-5 and headed south. When I saw the turnoff for I-90 a couple miles later, I took it and then drove up into the mountains toward eastern Washington, where I used to go camping with my dad. As I drove, my mind was racing. What did I want, really? In Ellensburg, I brought a sandwich in a supermarket and ate at a picnic table at the rest stop. Then I got back in the car and drove another hour. Just outside Yakima, I filled the tank at an ARCO station. After I paid, I headed back to the freeway. I could have kept driving, through Yakima and south into Oregon, but what was the point? I was tired of thinking, tired of driving, tired of everything. When I exited the gas station, I took the Seattle on-ramp. Instead of being crowded with a million thoughts, my mind shut down on the ride home. The setting sun turned the brown hillsides outside Yakima to gold. By the time I reached the mountains, it was deep twilight, the trees like shadows of themselves. I cleared Snoqualmie Pass a little past 10 and reached the house around 11. Chapter 8. Sunday morning, my mom pleaded with my dad and me to go to her new church, Mars Hill. It's different from a regular church. Vibrant, intellectual, socially committed. The people are there just because they want to be there. Just once, please. Spirituality is a part of life, too. The service lasted 11 to noon. The sermon was about making the world better in little ways. Afterward, cookies and coffees and Coke were served in the basement. My mom, her cheeks red, a circle of friends surrounding her, seemed like a different person. I'd never heard her talk so much or so fast. My dad got a cup of coffee and found himself in a corner. I felt lost, and then over by the food table I spotted Russ Diver. Our eyes locked for a moment before he looked away, pretending he hadn't seen me. Maybe it was listening to the sermon about doing the little things right, or maybe it was that I didn't want to play the coward. Whatever the reason, I made myself walk over to him. "Hey, Russ." "Hey, Mick," he answered, distrust in his eyes. "You come here much?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Every week. This is my first time." "Yeah, I figured." We stood, awkward and silent, and then he nodded toward an overweight girl who played clarinet in the school band, and whose name I'd heard but forgotten. She was holding up a paper cup and smiling at him. "I've got to go, Mick," he said. "Gina's waiting for me." He started off toward her. "Russ," I called, and he turned back. "I'm sorry about that day." His eyes went wide. "I should have been looking where—" "No, Russ," I said. "It was my fault." He nodded before quickly turning and heading off. For the next half hour, I stood in a corner, feeling awkward, feeling completely out of place. Every once in a while, I'd look over at Russ and he'd be laughing with Gina, or she'd be looking up at him as if he were a prince and he'd be looking at her as though she was a princess. He was the fat, blubbery loser. I was the guy on the football team. How could he have everything squared away while everything was in pieces for me? When I got home, a message from Drew was on the machine. He rattled on, trying to act as if nothing had happened, but I could feel the tension in his voice. "Give me a call," he said at the end, "or just show up at Green Lake." I listened to his message 3 times. It was another hot day, close to 90. They'd want to go swimming at Green Lake, all of them. But if I was there, we could be 10 feet from a lake and no one would even suggest it. They'd think they were being kind, but the silence would be humiliating. And it wouldn't just be today. It'd be all summer. Maybe there was a way, though. Little by little, the Novadex was working. If I got off the train entirely, if I never took the D-Bowl again, then the grossness would never come back. I could swim, I could sunbathe, I could walk the lake with my shirt off. Whatever any of them wanted to do would be okay, because I wouldn't be disgusting. I went downstairs, got into the Jeep, and headed out, not sure where. Driving along Fremont Avenue, I could feel the pull of Green Lake. Kaylee and Drew and Natalie and Heather and Deshawn, they were hanging out, talking, waiting for me. I thought again of Russ, Diver, and Gina. Okay, he was fat, and okay, she was nothing to look at, but still, they were happy being with each other, happy being themselves. I'd seen it in her eyes, in his. It could be that way for Kaylee and me. All I had to do was turn left, circle around to Stone Way, and drive to the lake. Maybe that's why I didn't do it, because it was so simple. I could always make that turn and go to Green Lake. I could always stop the steroids, stop the workouts with Peter, stop going to Popeyes. I could always give up on my dream of being something special on the football field. I could always be another guy on the football team. 3rd row back, 3rd from the end in the team photo. I could always be a nobody. Chapter 9. Peter spotted me as soon as I stepped through the door. "Hey, Mick," he said. "Good to see you again." "Good to be here," I said. He lowered his voice. "How's your body doing? The stuff working?" "Yeah, but slowly. You might always have some zits and some nipple puffiness. It varies from person to person." For a moment we both stood, neither of us speaking. Then I said it. "I want to do a real stack." He looked around the room. A couple of guys were within earshot. "Let's go in the back." I followed him to the meeting room. "You're sure?" he said once the door clicked shut behind us. "I'm sure." "Why the change?" "Because tryouts are coming up. I've got to be ready. The stuff you do, it'll make me stronger faster, right?" "Yeah, it will." He lowered his voice. "But you're talking injections, you know, and a lot of them." "I know. And you're okay with that?" "I don't really know if I'm okay with it or not. I'll know after I try it. I don't have to keep doing it once I start, right? I mean, I can always quit." "Sure, you can quit. It's not addicting." "And it won't mess me up?" "Not in 3 months it won't. Or even in 3 years. 30 years of use? That's another story." "I'm not worried about 30 years from now." He nodded. "Neither am I." He paused. "Mick, there's one last thing to get settled. Money. Doing a stack is going to cost you $15 a day. Can you cover that?" I did the calculations in my head, combining how much I'd saved with how much I could still earn. Tryouts were 6 weeks off. "Yeah, I can." Peter nodded toward the main exercise room. "You go out and do some lifts while I line things up. In an hour or so, I'll have a kit ready for you." I returned to the main training room and went and worked the dumbbells, keeping my eyes on the door to the back room, waiting for Peter to appear. At last the door opened and he motioned for me to rejoin him. "Here's how it works," he said, once we were alone. For the next few minutes, he talked about testosterone and Deca something and D-Bol and Nolvadex. I was supposed to take these 2 pills for the first week and then give myself one for the next couple of weeks and give myself injections on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. After that, my head was spinning. Peter stopped. "Look, I'll get a calendar and write down what you should do week by week until your tryouts start. For right now, let's just get the hard part over with." "The hard part?" "Mick, you know what I'm talking about." "You mean I'm going to do an injection right now?" "Right now." He eyed me. "You can still change your mind." I took a deep breath. "No, I'm ready." "Okay, here's how it works. In the beginning, we'll be partners. You'll give me an injection and then I'll give you one. After 3 or 4 times, you'll be on your own." My mouth was so dry I couldn't speak, but I did manage to nod. He picked up a vial and held it in front of him. "Here's the most important thing. Think clean." He dipped a cotton swab in isopropyl acid, pulled his shorts down a little, and spread the alcohol over the top part of his butt. Then he cleaned the top of the vial. "Once you've got everything clean, take the needle out of the wrapper, insert it into the syringe, and draw it full of air like this." I watched as he pulled the handle all the way back. "Next, stick the needle into the vial and push the air in. See?" I nodded. "After you've done that, turn the needle and vial upside down and pull back on the needle to fill the syringe, like this. You're going to be taking 200 milligrams each time," he said. "So, go to about 225 milligrams to compensate for any air bubbles. Once you've got the right amount, pull the needle out of the vial and then tap the plastic part of the syringe to get all the little bubbles out." I watched as he tapped it. "See how all the air moves toward the pin? Once that happens, push down the syringe like this to force the air out of the needle. Don't stop until a few drops of the stuff run down the pin." He handed the syringe to me. My hands were shaking so badly I didn't think I could hold it. Just relax, Mick. We're about ready. He pulled his shorts down a little again and re-swabbed the injection site. Clean, he said. Always clean. You ready? I guess. Okay, you're going to stick the needle in like it's a dart. Go ahead. I swallowed, then stuck the needle into his butt. All right, he said. That's good. Now slowly push down on the syringe. I pushed, just as I'd seen nurses push. It was way easier than I'd expected. That's right, Peter said, just like that. After about 10 seconds, the syringe was empty. I removed the needle and threw it into the trash. Immediately, Peter dipped another cotton swab onto alcohol, cleaned the injection site, and massaged the area. Rubbing cuts down on soreness, he said. Now I'll do you. It seemed like it had taken me an hour to give Peter his stuff. It took about 30 seconds for him to inject me. That wasn't bad, was it? He said when he finished. He put the stuff into a small travel kit and handed it to me. 4 times a week with this, Mick, and the 4 tablets every morning, and you're on your way. If the D-Bowl was like hitching a ride on an express train, this is like blasting off on a rocket. I'm talking an explosion. He raised a finger. Just remember to watch out for the rage and even more for the depression. Guys have had spells of depression 6 months after they've stopped doing injection. Don't get too wound up, because when you unwind, you'll spin that much faster. If depression does come, you've got to fight through it. I didn't go home. Instead, I got out on the road and drove. You do something huge like injecting steroids and you expect to feel hugely different. But I didn't. In fact, I had to keep telling myself over and over that I'd just done an injection, that I just started on a real stack. I took the ramp to Aurora Avenue and drove along the viaduct toward West Seattle. I had a CD playing, but I wasn't listening. In my mind, I was back at the foothill game. Only now I was stronger. Now it was number 50 who had the turf give way. Now he was crumbling, and I was in the end zone. Was that really what the needle would do? Would it change everything? When I got home, my mom told me Drew had called. When he had called me before, it had been as if I'd been thrown a life ring. Now, with one injection, everything had flipped 180 degrees. The zits would be coming back, but it wasn't just the zits I was hiding. It was everything. I punched in his number. We missed you today at Green Lake, he said. Kaylee especially. You coming tomorrow? I can't, Drew. My dad is after me to finish painting the house before football starts. My afternoons are jammed. How long is it going to take? I don't know. Maybe all summer. To paint your house? He wants it done right, and starting tomorrow, I'm going back to Popeyes to work out. I paused. I can't let that Kane kid beat me out. I could hear Drew sigh through the phone line. Mick, we need 6 to play. If you stop coming, Natalie's going to ask Brad Middleton when he comes back from Scotland. You hear what I'm saying? There's nothing I can do. I wish I could play, but I can't. Okay, he said. I wanted to make sure you knew the score. When I hung up, I stared at the phone. It wasn't that big of a deal, I told myself. Sure, I wanted to hang out with Drew, with Kaylee, but you can't have everything. 6 weeks, that's all I was giving up. After 6 weeks, football would start and I'd have 2 practices every day until the season started. Then there wouldn't be time to play volleyball, to walk the lake with Kaylee. In those 6 weeks, I was giving up. I could transform myself. I could make myself into the player I wanted to be. And the payoff would be this season and the next season and the season after that. Peter had said it would be like a rocket ride, but day in and day out, it was just hard work. He had me double the time I spent lifting, and he had me work to total failure, where I actually had to drop the weights because I couldn't move them either up or down. I'd work out, drink some Gatorade, work out, work out, work out, work out. And when I finished at the gym, I'd run 3 miles at the Seattle Pacific Track to keep up my stamina. On Saturdays, Peter would take me to the back room and lay out which pills I should take when, the days I should do the injections, and the progress he expected from me. That first week, I did the injections with Peter. But after that, I injected myself. Once an injection was done, a sense of power would rush through every cell of my body, and every time I looked at myself in the mirror after I showered, I seemed not only stronger, but also older, more like a man.